So let's talk about depersonalization realization myth number one. It is the myth that DPDR are a symptom of anxiety. 99.9% of the time, if you hear somebody talk about these symptoms, that's what they're going to say, is that they're a symptom of anxiety. But if you study the nervous system long enough, eventually you're going to come across something called the polyvagal theory understanding of the nervous system. This was developed by Dr. Stephen Porges, who's a neuroscientist. And it's a much more in-depth understanding of the nervous system. And what it teaches is that whenever our brain either perceives threat or if we're actually under threat, our nervous system responds with a hierarchy of responses based upon their evolutionary development, starting with the most recent to the oldest. So let's say that our brain perceives threat or there's a real threat. The very first thing that our nervous system is going to look to do to calm us down is look to other people, other mammals, right? This is actually not exclusive of human beings, but it's called co-regulation. We will look to other people to calm us down, which will activate something called the ventral vagal branch of the parasympathetic nervous system. But let's say that we can't find regulation through co-regulation, then we go into fight or flight response. This is obviously where our body increases cortisol, adrenaline, all kinds of stress hormones. Our heart is elevated, our heart rate is elevated, our breathing elevates, our thoughts are racing. This is what technically we call anxiety. It's really fight or flight response. But let's say that our perception of threat or the actual threat increases and we feel trapped, we feel overwhelmed. That's whenever we default to the most ancient defense mechanism, which is the freeze response. And part of that freeze response, which is the dorsal vagal branch of the parasympathetic nervous system, is to prepare us to be eaten by the lion. Because think about it, we haven't been successful at fighting or fleeing. We feel overwhelmed, we feel trapped. And our brain at that point, and not until that point, right, may start to make us feel dissociated, which comes from a Latin root word that means to sever or separate, from our body. We feel separated from our body. We look at our hands and they don't feel like our own. We feel out of our body. This is depersonalization. Or maybe our surroundings start to feel fake and dreamlike. This is derealization. This is not going to happen if there's still a fighting chance. Your nervous system only deploys those symptoms once you hit that point of overwhelming stress, also known as traumatic stress. DPDR are technically trauma coping mechanisms. Trauma is not a past event. It is a state of overwhelming stress. For me, DPDR initially showed up during a panic attack, and first I tried to look after a bad marijuana experience. First, I tried to look to my friends to calm down. That didn't work. Then I started pacing back and forth. I was fighting or fleeing. And once I felt that I was trapped because I asked for them to call an ambulance and they wouldn't, that's whenever my nervous system was like, this ship's going down, and that's whenever DPDR happened.